Now in post here, what we can do, we can create a bundle, right? And say bundle is equal to get intent dot get extra, like that. Bundle is not equal to null, meaning we have something. Then we're gonna go ahead and say string. Say username is equal to bundle dot get string username such, and I'm going to say string user ID is equal to bundle dot get string, and we call it user ID. Now you notice that this is what we've been doing, and this works just fine. Now for the purposes in this application, this project here, this will just clutter our entire project. So what we're going to do is we're going to store the username and user ID because we may want to use these two pieces of data across the entire application. To make things a little bit better, I'm going to create a global class which will hold the username and user ID. Okay, so username and user ID as such. To do that, let's go ahead and create a class. But before I create a class here, I'm going to actually go ahead and create a package. This package is going to be inside of main like that. I'm going to call this util, okay, for utilities. And inside here, I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call this journal API. Now, I want to make sure that this is seen everywhere in our application. So I'm going to make the superclass to be application, like that, Android application. All right, I'm going to say OK, just like this. Now, because I want also this to be a singleton, because we don't need to say new journal API or instantiate this object every time we want, we're going to make this a singleton. But before we do that, let me close this down, and I'm going to create a few instance variables here. So it's going to be string username, right? Private string user ID as such. Okay, let's create a few getters and setters like this. That's very good. And now I'm going to create another private static. I'm going to call this journal API, call this instance, like that. Okay, so I'm going to make this a singleton. That's why I need an instance of type journal type. So while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and create, say, public journal API, just going to be an empty constructor. Okay, here I'm going to create a static get instance. So I'm going to say public static journal API. Notice it has to have the same name as the class. I'm going to call this get instance. So it's going to be a get instance method of type journal API. So here I'm going to make sure that instance is null before I create a new instance of this class. So I'm going to say instance is equal to new journal API, just like that. Okay. In fact, I can get rid of the curly braces there. And I'm going to say here return instance in any case. All right. So it will always return an instance if it needs to return a new instance. In this case here, if the instance is null, it's going to create a new instance, new journal API object, and return it. Okay. In another case, it will just go ahead and return whatever we already have. Now, because this journal API class extends the application, which is exactly what we want this journal API to be able to be accessible throughout the entire application. But for that to work, we need to do something else, right? We need to go to our manifest here and register it to say this indeed is going to be part of the application. So inside of our application tag, just below here, if you just start typing name, enter, and the moment you do that like that, it will tell us, oh, you want to go and get the util journal. Indeed, that's what I want. Just enter like that, and life is good. Okay, so now we've said that this journal API, it is indeed a singleton, but most importantly, it's a singleton that can be used anywhere in our application. Now notice also we have all these squiggly lines here. We can actually get rid of this by suppressing all of that. So now it's all clean. So going back here, we can get rid of that. Get rid of all these others that we don't need. So here what we did, we added this intent, which is good, but we are actually going to use our API, our journal API, to then retrieve and save the user ID as well as username. Okay, so that way we don't have to be passing them around. We don't have to make calls to our database to retrieve all that information. So it's something that's handy that could be needed at any time. So right below here where we are passing, remember this is create account activity. I'm just going to go and say journal API, call this journal API is equal to journal API, just get the instance. Okay, this is our global API, if you will. So now I'm going to say journal API dot set user ID. I'm going to pass current user ID, right? And then I'm going to say journal dot set username, and it's going to be name, which is exactly what we're getting from here. Okay. Now we can leave this as it is, but at this point here, when we go to our, let's save this, when we go to our post journal, we don't need to do this no longer, right? Because we can just go ahead and say something like this, journal API.get instance.get user ID, and we should have a user ID. If we want to get username, we can do as such as well. Okay, it's much easier that way. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this because we won't need it anymore. And what we're going to do next is we're going to put together the post journal activity XML, the user interface. So right here, let me get rid of the things that we don't need anymore. Very good. So we're going to keep the constraint layout here. Good. So I'm going to go to design. So the first thing I'm going to add is an image view. So I'm going to pull it in here and put it there. At this point here, notice that we have these avatars and background scenics. So we can click one of these. These are assets that can be used just for design, meaning that we can't use this at runtime. As it says here, this sample resource will be used at design time. Okay, so I can pick one. Let's just pick this image there. Actually, I need to use a set. Just click that one, say OK. And you can see it is showing there. I have my image view. So it looks like it's a very big image here. So let's go ahead and restructure everything. First of all, I'm going to make it so that I have my constraints. So top constraint, left and right. Make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Like this. And I'm going to make it to the top there. Very good. That looks very good. All right, I'm going to put the bottom constraint there as well, but I want to keep it there. Very good. All right, so next I'm going to add a text view. It's going to be right there. Put that those constraints. I want this to be something like about there. A little bit larger. Another image. In fact, let me put this at the top there. Let's see. Get another text image, text view that is there. And it's going to be to the bottom, the connection. Put it right there. Connect to that one there. Okay, looking good. And I'm going to find an image view. I'm going to put in the middle there. At this point, I'm going to go to Android because I actually am looking for camera, that one. Say OK. And there it is. It's very small, but make it a little bigger. And there we go. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to make this connect to that. All right. And I'm going to constrain to the left and right. And I want this to be in the middle. There we go. All right. So we have our image button there, camera, all these constraints, and I'm going to add a text view. I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and add and edit text at this point here. Say edit text, plain text, put there. This is the fun part. And for now, I'm just going to make sure that this is actually connected to the bottom of this whole view. So now we know it's always going to be there. And I'm going to move this. I'm going to make this about 8 to the top, or even less, about 0. Very good. So that way it's below our first text there. All right, so now that we have that, I'm going to make sure that that's connected there. And this should be all the way like that. Maybe move a little bit down. Okay, like that. And I'm going to add another. I'm going to copy and redo that. Let's get rid of that connection there. Let's see, just to create a new one, just to make sure. All right, looks good. And I'm going to, of course, make sure that it's constrained with the top one there. And I'm going to add also a progress bar here. All of these will make sense once we have everything. So this progress bar, you know what it does at this point. You're just going to make sure that when they hit save this post, then something should happen. Okay, and I'm going to add the last thing here is going to be a button, just a normal button. I'm going to go ahead and make all the constraints that are needed. I'm going to make it all the way as such. It's going to be to the bottom here, but I'm going to add there. Very good. There's a few more things that we need to align and also add all the IDs that we need. But at this point here, things are looking really good. So as you can see, we're going to be able to allow users to click and add their own image from the gallery or from downloads images on our phone. They're going to be able to put the title and then the actual thought or the journal. Once all is done, they're going to be able to say click a button, and then we're going to be saving the journal or the entry. All right, very good. So we're making good progress. We'll continue working on this in the next video.